We're gonna go ahead and get started because they've started my clock, so that's usually the indicator for where we run. Welcome everyone. This is the session on patient experience in the EMR, and yes, I had to double check that. This is my second session, so with any luck, I will give you the right presentation today. My name is Meredith Staszak. I am the product manager for patient experience here at InterSystems, and that's me. Okay. So really, I wanted to take today to focus on really two sort of key things. So I'm going to start by spending a good amount of time talking through more generally this concept of a patient engagement platform, specifically as we're seeing it develop and how we're investing and where we're investing in relation to our engagement strategy as well as with our own EMR and how that affects everyone in your EMRs. And then I want to take a time to kind of just pivot and talk more abstractly. I think we didn't have much time to get into this my session yesterday, but with all the changes that were illustrated quite nicely in the keynotes yesterday around consumerism, digital disruptions, I want to take some time to highlight a couple things that occurred over the past 2 years, what we're seeing from partners of ours, from customers of ours in the industry as well, and kind of open the room a little bit to conversation around where we think these things can go. So what was built, what was innovated, does it have life past COVID and COVID-related use cases? So it's a little bit of a split presentation. I see you being confused. It's fine. We're all going to be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this concept of a patient engagement platform. So part of my role as the patient experience product manager is really to start looking completely and holistically around the patient and their care across the entire continuum of care. So I think Eduardo mentioned it in his presentation yesterday, but really that full 365 view of the patient. So while I'm present and I'm having services, but also the time around that. And I think it's key that as organizations, we start looking at this more as a platform. So every organization here is going to have a different patient population. They're going to need to offer different services to some extent. So it becomes kind of this game of figuring out what are the right set of services for me, my organization, my patients, and being able to put together that platform. So also it's a similar thought and nature to Scott's presentation this morning on data fabrics and smart data services. You really want to build out a platform with your key services that are really going to help engage your patients best. So what you're seeing on screen is really kind of my first pass at this from an InterSystems perspective. So as your EMR vendor, as your interoperability vendor, as potentially your digital platform for patient engagement vendor, where do we feel that investing our time and efforts are going to help accelerate your engagement platform faster? So that's why it's a bit smaller. So I don't have things such as CRM on here, but the indication would be that those are additional pieces of your platform that play around with that. So given that kind of concept of a platform, these are the 5 that I've pulled out as fundamental to all of our patients. So regardless of who you're serving, where you're serving them, these are the kind of key services that we've been hearing resonate with our patients. So first up is data access. So that's really the ability as a patient to be able to access what I need out of my medical record or my patient information, when I need it, where I need it, how I need it, in a format that makes sense. We're moving into then this area of communications. So if we're looking, you can think as simple as your basic portal interactions where we have async messaging. We can start expanding that area to not just communications maybe between people, but with systems as well. So chatbots or really any other way to really communicate with your patient while they're outside the facility. Third up is really appointments. So this one, I keep bringing back the concept of booking flights, and I was thrilled that that actually came up in the keynote yesterday because I like to use that one. That whole experience for me is very seamless. I booked it. I had to actually change my flights, was able to do that. Didn't have to talk to a single soul, which I like. Very seamless, got notifications as I was being postponed and postponed and postponed, which is annoying, but also good because I knew. And then, for international travel that I had actually prior to this, I was able to preload all of my various COVID pieces, and nobody asked me again for it. So there's a lot of parallels to just that experience and what we ought to do in terms of appointments. that I think is a lot of places we're still falling a little bit short. So we really want to take time to look at that complete area. Again, thinking back to yesterday, that whole idea that there's a consumer experience change. Why can I book my flight, change my flight, and do all these things, but I have to sit on the phone, or I don't get any updates about my appointments for days. So we're really kind of taking the time to look at appointments from start to finish, what it takes to get an appointment, manage it, everything I need to do before I come in, actually making sure that that's feeding back to the appropriate people. Because I don't know about you, but it's incredibly frustrating for me when I pre-fill out everything to walk in and fill it out again. All the way through to check-in. I think check-in's really fun. When I was telling somebody this story the other day, is I had my PCP, got really, really excited because I had the app, got within the range of the facility, a big check-in button came in, and I pressed the button, and then I went inside and checked in. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. Next time the button will work for me. It'll be okay. And then really kind of tying that to the end stages around billing and payment, and taking the time to understand what that really needs to look like from a patient's perspective. Invoices are hard to read. We don't know what we're paying for. I don't actually know half the time if I owe money. Like, I'll get something in the mail that's just like, hey, this was $1,000. And you're like, do I owe that? And then you get a second piece of mail that's like, oh, no, you don't owe anything, you're fine. So really kind of making sure that we're making that a little bit seamless as well. And finally then, telemedicine. So we can't escape this conversation. COVID forced a lot of changes here, and that's actually where the majority of this presentation is going to be. But a lot of things were, it was a lot of people's first times interacting digitally. I think we learned a lot. I think as an industry, we were able to see that there's room here. A door is opened, and that's what I really want to spend today focusing on is, what's beyond it? How much further do we want to open the door, and where do we really want to go with this? Given those 5 key sets of services, I truly believe all of them have similar underpinnings, and so that's kind of what we're seeing below. You might disagree with me that some of these should be their own big squares, and let me know, because I can draw them and just draw them over there, it'll be fine. Notifications, reminders, so whether or not we're using a portal or any sort of aspect, being able to understand, I have data available, or here's your negative COVID test, thank you. Your appointment's coming up, et cetera. So I think we're all in kind of agreement that this sort of functionality underpins anything that we want to do up there, as well as then opening the door around data capture. So if I stick with my appointment scenario earlier, I might have a consent form to say I'm consenting for the service that I'm coming in for. I might have sets of online forms that I need to fill out to basically confirm, here's my medical information. Yes, my meds are right, my allergies are right, et cetera. Or I might have some patient report outcomes and measures once I've been discharged that they're asking me to follow up on. Come on in, you can sit up front. I haven't kicked anyone yet, it'll be fine. They're nervously moving down. She's pulled her feet up, so she knows she's prepared. She wasn't there yesterday. I didn't kick anyone yesterday, I promise. Anyway, so with that, as I mentioned, and I can and I have and I did, I will talk everyone's ear off about the rest of this, but I actually kind of want to move on from that to talk more around the disruptions and innovations that we saw in the telemedicine space. So if you have thoughts, opinions, find me. I'm around all week, and I would love to chat with all of you. So given that, let's take a little bit of look into a couple key areas around telemedicine. So for each of these, what I want to do is present some sort of digital advancement that occurred, kind of talk through, if we know where it's going somewhere, where it's going, maybe share some ideas around where I think they'll go next, and then kind of just let you ponder that as you eat your desserts afterwards. All right, so first up, virtual visits, telehealth. I think we're all very aware that this saw enormous sets of growth over the pandemic. So these are based on a survey done in the US of about 35 million patients. Pre-COVID, 0.3% of all services were done via telehealth. 4 months into it, we were already up to 23.6%. So I think it's very clear that Obviously, this was important. We were forced to make some real quick changes that I think really benefited everyone here. And then additionally with this, by the numbers, even Medicare saw a 63% increase. And I think for the most part, we definitely figured out, how to be creative. I don't think it's necessarily the right mode of service for everything. So the example you here is my sister's actually an occupational therapist, works with children, babies through 3 years old. So that's in-home visits is what they always did going into COVID. So it's very hands-on with the children, teaching the parents how to do stuff. And they had to figure out how to go virtual. So they did implement some level of telehealth. But I'd say they're one of those areas where they're finding the right balance now. So there were certain aspects of their job that made sense to be telehealth visits. They can do the initial sort of assessment where they're talking through, concerns with the patient and the parent, which I don't know who are parents here of very small children. Scheduling, I hear, is a nightmare. And, so it was a very nice convenience for the parents in that case to be able to have these digital interactions as they could. Now they're back to the in-person actual hands-on for learning, but they're alternating between physically being back in the home for check-ins versus having the follow-ups digitally when that makes more sense for the kids and the parents. So I think it's just an interesting sort of balance of figuring out where telehealth is going to make sense and where it doesn't, and we're going to need to roll back from that. And so I think most people probably experienced this over the pandemic, but just in case you didn't, I do have a couple things that I want to go ahead and show you. So even from the perspective of start to end of the pandemic, we've seen changes between how these were initiated. So if I bring up, and hopefully I'm all logged in, where basically, people did what they had to do in the first couple weeks. We had, yes. Let me just shrink the screen. It's fine. Okay. Where, we did what we need to do and it's not sharing. Oh, great. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. No, that's fine. It's fine. We did this yesterday. This room has an awful angle. Oh my God. Okay. I can't take it on a road trip. All right. It's gonna be what it is. Okay. So this is gonna make this a little more difficult for me, but demos are more fun this way. So basically, I've completely lost my train of thought, so I'm just gonna pause for a moment and figure that out. Start of pandemic, right. Start of pandemic, even at some points now, I've heard stories of people just having FaceTime appointments with their doctors. So I think that's kind of where we needed to get the door open to get people started and engaged digitally. And then the next step has been, okay, well, the experience is interesting when you're just straight up FaceTiming, both from a provider perspective and a patient perspective. So naturally, the next step is, kind of streamlining those into their workflows themselves. So what you're seeing on screen is actually REMR. So this is track care for anyone that hasn't seen it. I really can't drive it this way, but it's gonna be fine. Okay. So the key things that I wanted to kind of just point out here was the ability to sort of embed this more naturally into the flow. So from a booking perspective, I pre-booked someone, but generally the same way I would book any other appointment in my EMR is available in my EMR. It immediately went ahead and generated for me the appropriate meeting link that I as a provider can see. So if I come in and I'm looking at my list for today, I'm also not clinical, so just ignore how badly I talk about these things. I'm going to go ahead and I can see that I have, a telehealth visit. It's clearly labeled. It's got the meeting link here that I can go ahead and launch if I crank my head around, which goes ahead and opens for me a Teams meeting. Okay. Wow. Okay. More fun. Nope. Oh, no. Oh, no. No. Okay. This is fine. It's going to be fine. So I'm going to just keep talking, and you won't see my beautiful side, which is the patient side of this, where, seriously? Okay. Open window, new window. We're just going to, Chrome is dead. Chrome is dead. Long live Chrome. okay, you know what? We're going to abandon the demo. And that's just how this is going to work today. So I'm going to talk through and now my PowerPoint's done. Okay, this is getting better. Okay. No longer running anything on my screen, so that's fine. So basically, what I would have loved to show you, and I'm wondering if I can do it off my phone quickly, is what this ends up looking like for the patient. So with the provider, we took kind of the next step to make sure that this is part of their workflow. It's very seamless for me to, from a booking, from a scheduling, from an accessing perspective, it's right there. For the patient themselves, the two key things that we were looking at, first was around making sure that this is all available to the patient if they are one of your portal users. Everybody has a portal. It may not be the most natural place for someone to decide where they want to log in and launch their telehealth visit, but we can go ahead and have that available for them there as well. And the other thing, which was going to be my cool bit, was all of the calendar stuff, where also, more generally, if you're like me, you're probably everyone in the room. I saw you just put a phone away. See, checking calendars, checking schedules on your phone. You don't care about the portal. So being able to make sure that when we generated that actual meeting, we generating the appropriate calendar invite, because if you're like me, I live off of my actual iPhone and that calendar. So being able to actually then launch the meeting from there instead of having to come into another application, to launch another application, to download another application, to maybe finally talk to my doctor. So different ways that we can kind of look at streamlining that experience for patients. So with that, you would have seen me show off Teams. So the next slide makes more sense had you seen Microsoft Teams. No, I don't need to see stuff. It's fine. One of the things I want to talk about is continual advancements from one of our partners. So we're partnering with Microsoft. The Teams integration you just saw was something that was a first pass at our first play at that. And as we're making patient experience updates, they're making patient experience updates. So you didn't see it, so I'll explain to you what would have happened, is that my patient, and maybe you've experienced it, would have had to actually launch Teams to enter that meeting. So I think everyone in here probably wouldn't have noticed, second guess, because we use Teams, we use all these things all the time. Someone like my mother might have had a slight problem with that. So the first thing that they're rolling out that I'm really excited about is this concept of browser join, which really eliminates that need to actually install Teams. So instead of prompting the user to say, go ahead and install this, adding a little bit of complexity to it, we can immediately just launch the meeting for them without any sort of additional information. And the second piece for that is around this concept of a waiting room. So again, kind of drawing back to yesterday's keynotes, making in-person and digital very similar. So now both have this idea of a waiting room that you can enter. For this, it'll go ahead and help you check that your devices are working, and it lets you know that you're actually waiting. So instead of just, we've all been in meetings where we've launched Teams and sat there for like 5 minutes waiting for the stragglers. This actually now has a real nice customizable message for you and your patients to say, yes, we acknowledge you're here, we're waiting, thank you for waiting, etc. So that's something that we're going to be working on with them later this year to kind of roll out the next iteration integrated with both Track Care and Personal Community, and just some ideas of what that ends up looking like. So our lovely patient here went ahead and clicked the link and immediately just came into here. He's got a button that says join the waiting room, so he's able to kind of check that all of his stuff is ready and good to go. And then this is what I think, it seems very simple, but from a user perspective, putting a message like this in front of my mom, she would feel so much better because she understands now that she's in a waiting room, nobody's forgotten about her. And it really just kind of takes that experience up a level. So it's sometimes the littlest things. Just maybe it's if I'm going to keep calling back to things yesterday. It's sprinkles on the cupcake. So like we got the cupcake, we've thrown sprinkles on it, maybe a cherry on top, and then we're going to go on for the cake from here. So that's kind of my real whirlwindy adventure on telehealth. So I wanted to pivot a little bit on that to this concept of remote monitoring around how do we take care of patients, how do we further take care of patients when they're outside the facility. So really I'm oversimplifying this to be the ability for patients or devices to provide information back to their care team. So a couple use cases or scenarios here. Been having some very interesting conversations with rehab facilities. So again, another industry that needed to pivot slightly. They wanted to discharge you, send you home, but they have weekly sort of check-ins or daily check-ins after the service you had for some amount of time. What I learned talking to people is most of them just have a call list. So someone in the staff every day picks up the phone and calls people to ask them the same set of questions. So it's an area that I think is really primed for this kind of idea of remote monitoring or wellness checks. So instead of somebody picking up the phone, maybe I get a notification on my phone as a patient, hey, it's your wellness check day. I go ahead, log in, fill out my information and send that along. So that's one area where I think we can see a lot of potential room for growth moving forward. I do want to call out one COVID-related one. I don't think you can ever kind of get away from any conversation about remote monitoring of devices, but this is one that actually played out very nicely. So going along with COVID, our customer Gemelli in Italy, they had to discharge people that still needed some level of care. I mean, obviously decisions have to be made about who you can actually continue to treat in the facility and who you need to send home. So they had sets of patients that still required additional isolation that they couldn't have in the hospital anymore, and they needed to continue to monitor them as they moved forward. So they actually did this with some telemonitoring kits. So as the patient was discharged, they were sent home with a telemonitoring kit that actually integrated directly with TrackCare. So instead of, again, this kind of cold calling, they had sort of this automated feed from the kit itself, taking the readings and additional information that they needed, and going ahead and pulling that all the way back into the patient's health record. So I think it's like an obstacle course up here. It's the most concrete use case I've seen, I think, for devices so far. And now that we've seen success in one, inevitably this will reopen the door, I think, for restarting those conversations around sending people home with various devices. Smart scales. I think the iHealth devices do like a pulse oximeter or your blood pressure, and really starting to think through, well, what data makes sense for us to be capturing, filling back, and what we do with it. And then the last thing I really wanted to talk to was this concept of phones. And it's twofold. So everybody here has a phone. You use it all the time. It's probably the one thing you have with you constantly. I actually think I have mine with me more than my wallet at this point, which I realized was concerning. But I was like, oh, I don't have an ID, but that's fine. I don't really need it. So conceptually being able to understand from a patient's perspective, what makes sense for me to have with me? Do things, is it better for me to be able to seamlessly access, a system to pull stuff down? Do I need to have my own storage on the phone itself when it comes to medical data? What makes sense for me to have? What do I want to have? So I think this is actually one of those areas where I think we have to step back from just making a mandate and just kind of saying, what do people actually want and need? Which is a little bit of a change for this industry, but being able to understand what do they need, how do they need it, and how does that better their life? And the flip side, I have a smartwatch, you have a smartwatch, you have a smartwatch. Is that smart? That's smartwatch. Okay. Almost everyone in here is tracking something, and you're now creating your own data silo. But you're also learning and understanding things about yourself that you probably didn't realize. So I actually am somewhat recently recovered from COVID. I am fine, everyone, I promise. I'm not going to be the one that takes this conference down. But it was, I promise. But it was really interesting to me because it was something I didn't think to check. I bought this for fitness tracking, but I use it for sleep tracking. Like I noticed different things for sleeping. And if you go back right before I became incredibly symptomatic with COVID, my sleep pattern changed insanely. Now, maybe that's anecdotal. I don't really know. But it's a weird thing that at least, if I had been paying attention, would I have noticed? I don't know. The idea being that, though, we're all somewhat tracking and learning things about ourselves. And the watches are especially getting weirdly smarter with what they're tracking and getting closer and closer to actual medical devices. And this data is not necessarily going anywhere. So I think we're getting very close to the point where we have to figure out what matters, what's going to matter in my care. Because again, if I'm taking care of myself and I have 3 apps that I'm managing on my phone, I know all these things about me. It makes sense that my care team should. And there are probably clinical people in the room that are like, I don't want all that data, and that's fine. We'll figure it out. But I think we're getting to the point that from an experience perspective, I'm starting to know an awful lot about me that my care team no longer knows. So how do we handle that? And that's kind of one of those big looming questions I'm just leaving everyone in the room with without an answer. I don't have answers for anyone. So if anyone came with the answer, like I'm just here to ask questions today. But I did want to call out a couple different things that occurred and how they were used, and where, again, this I think opens the door for continual conversation and understanding where we could go. So the first was around the idea of digital cards. This was actually a huge life changer for me. I got my vaccination card on my phone. I was no longer paranoid about losing my paper card. For Boston, we basically had to show proof of vaccination everywhere we went to do anything, almost. Yeah. So like I said, big game changer. I was paranoid. Again, I already mentioned I don't always have my wallet on me. So the chances of me now forgetting my wallet, which has my piece of paper in it, just sent my anxiety through the roof. So now I have a digital copy that I can get anytime I want. And it's been really great for traveling or walking into events. Just pop up, it's neon pink. I didn't get to choose the color.
So in the UK, that's the NHS app.
There you go. So in the UK, we got the NHS app. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. So a lot of people rolled out different things like that. I know in the Middle East, there was the IATA, I think was the other one. The Green Pass, I think was the other one I was hearing about in Italy. So there was this standard concept of being able to create a digital card. And we used it very specifically for COVID. I have an iPhone, so everything's going to be an iPhone. Use your phone of choice here and don't judge me, please. But I think, like I said, here's the bright pink. It was really nice and pretty. But being able to kind of collect these cards, and I think from my perspective, the question naturally becomes, what other cards are useful? Are other cards useful? It's a weird, kind of open-ended question. Like, do I need my entire medical record in a smart card? I don't know, maybe. But if I'm talking to my sister who has kids who has to prove their vaccination records routinely, a vaccination card that's got the complete list of her kids' vaccines seems really, really interesting. And from a technical perspective, there's like no lift to this. So this is all FHIR, it's all secure. That list of resources is available. It's really just at this point, not a technical limitation, but an idea or a business reason. What is going to make sense here and what do we want to invest in? But I also think it's another one of those fun balances, because just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. If we now give our patients 50, 60 cards, or if we just simply moved the many portal problem to the many card problem. So I do think it requires a little bit of thought to just kind of suss through, what actually needs to be with me, mobile, readily accessible, versus just having on my phone, which segues into having actual data on my phone. So this is something that actually started pre-COVID. I don't have any stats on how much people use it. If people don't mind answering, I'll ask. I'm very cautious about asking questions about what people do with their medical data, but has anyone actually used either the Apple or the Common Health to start storing your information locally? There you go, I got one back. And thumbs up, you like it, you love it. Do you move, is it multiple systems? Like, are you using it primarily? Talk to us. Yep. Is great. Yes. All right, so we got one key user. I'm seeing some head nodding. Nobody else likes it. Okay, that's fine, you like it, yeah. Again, multiple systems or just convenience. I don't have to log back in. Yeah, okay. So I think it's gaining traction. It's another area where, as a EMR vendor, understanding how you get yourself into the stores and getting your data available, and again, getting through what you're gonna share is probably the harder lift rather than the technical lift. Again, smart on FHIR stuff. And really what that ends up looking like, we have actually done it. So I like to show off things that we've actually done as a company. If you're less familiar with it, this is the Apple one again, but you're able to actually kind of go in, choose the facility. You're redirected to log in. So you're logging in with whatever portal or identity management system that's being used by your organization. And stuff just kind of flows in and you're able to, continue to chart it. And you can always kind of see where that data is coming from. So it's kind of an interesting move to see where we can start pulling data from different places together, again, having it on there. And this is where I get into internal debates with myself. If I have this, do I need the card? Do I need them both? How do they play together? What am I really doing with this information? I don't know. But it's a convenient thing. I will mention, I keep saying Apple. Common Health is the Android equivalent. So I think that actually got announced as a partnership with them maybe about a year ago. I'm looking over there. Yes. Okay. Maybe about a year ago. So it's not you're not isolating people by enabling this anymore. Like there's an equivalent for both of the two leading phone vendors that people have. So finally, I am going to do something Apple specific, and I am starting to lose my voice, and I blame the band. Where she was around here somewhere. Where did she go? She escaped. I was blaming the band. I can blame you for the band, though, and singing along yesterday. But the flip side of this, so we're able now, as patients, I'm generating, again, all of that information about myself. How are we determining what's relevant and what needs to go back? Not just from a control and a consent perspective, because there is definitely that aspect that, what do I have that I want my PCP to see? What do I have that I might want a specialist to see? But also, making sure that from the provider's perspective, it's being used. Because I do imagine the next frustration for patients would be if all of a sudden, I can turn all this on and I can push all my data back and nobody's looking at it. So there's again, a lot of these crossroads between technologically we're there, but I'm not sure we're quite there to figure them out. So in this case, Apple's got two things going on. I did start as I believe both are US only at the moment. So we do have some international folks here, but just to kind of make that a little bit clear around how you can share data. So the first is an example of sharing it with your doctor. So again, I believe they've launched this with a couple different sites using both, I believe Cerner and Epic sites at this point. We're in the original pilot where you're actually able to, now that you've got it all, maybe you've got great step data you want to push back, I don't know. You brag about how healthy you are. I went on a run and I want my doctor to know about it. They should give me a high five. That I'm able to come through and choose. And I actually think this is a really interesting concept where it's not an all or nothing. I am able to say with some level of granularity that it's this type of data that I want to push back. And then as a first pass, and so I think if I'm trying out the cake thing. If the first cake, let's say on the Apple side, not cake, cupcake, sorry, was just having a simple sort of smart app that can be embedded in the EMR. So I don't believe at this point the data necessarily triggers or lives alongside any sort of additional workflows for your providers, but it's there. And it's there in a way that it's clear, hey, this is coming from your patient, this is coming from their devices, which I think will help kind of bridge that gap a little bit between understanding patients entered data versus I was entered in a clinical setting sort of a scenario. So that's really interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as it rolls out more internationally. I was trying to see if I could share with anyone to show. Unfortunately, none of my providers are up there, but if anyone wants to give it a whirl and let us know, that'd be great. And the last one actually I think has nothing to do with EMRs or anything else. I just found fascinating and I wanted to share it because I stumbled across it the other day. It's almost like a redo or a retake on proxies. So from the portal perspectives, we've always had this idea that you can establish relationships. A parent has a relationship with their child, so they can access digitally their child's information. A lot of that's been restricted to actual portals. I came across this and I haven't done anything with it yet, but it's almost like the next sort of iteration of this where I can now, not only can I push my data back to my providers, I can choose to share it with people in my family. So again, my parents are both iPhone users. they are entering an aging sort of population. This is kind of interesting to me. Now, as a non-clinical person, I'm not exactly sure what I would do with their data on my phone. But it's kind of a unique thought to say, okay, well, in this case, I'm tracking mom, and here's her trends. Now, again, I don't know that I would track my mom's sleep. So this may be one of those things that just kind of enters, we did it. We don't know if we needed to do it, but we did it, and we can do it, because there's always one of those. And that's why the other reason I want to bring it up, I'm like, maybe it's a bad idea. Maybe I really do need to track my mom's sleep for her because she can't. But I think it's an interesting way to just kind of end, to get you thinking around other areas or other ways that we can start pulling in or using data as we kind of move forward. Have you used it?
No, I haven't used it.
Oh.
Are they thinking about not only what's in mom's record, but where mom is?
I don't know. That's a...
They looked at like whether they could admit it.
I don't think there's any of the geo stuff in there yet, or at least not that I stumbled across, but like I said, I just got really excited and I was like, this is kind of cool. But that would be an interesting next step. You're heading me straight into digital gray area though, where I'm like, again, just because we can, should we? Yeah.
But it's not this.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry. We've just been having a casual conversation.
So we called it designee alerts.
Yes.
And so, but it's part of the proxy. So you have to have proxy access
Yep.
to the patient portal, but it's not this.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't honestly answer where Apple's going with it next. They don't like to tell things in advance. But do you know? Oh, great.
They're talking about over too. My parents share the location with me, and I can tell you exactly where they are right now. And so that's something that Apple's already doing, and it's not health related, but it's of course health related, right?
Right.
And so this is that gray area of it's totally relevant, but we're tracking it already, and we can use it for health, but it's for life.
It's life. Oh, and it really is. It's actually funny. I actually completely forgot about that. I'm like, no, I do that with my friends when we're on vacation, so we don't lose each other.
Yeah, right.
Like if somebody's wandered off from the hotel, we're like, oh, there they are. Okay, great.
Yeah, I've got 3 kids, and I know where they're at all times. They're 1,800 miles away, but I know exactly where they're at, right? So I mean, it's just
Oh man, this is good.
For instance, measuring of your sleep tracking of your mom.
Yeah.
But if she is in a condition, maybe dementia, you can follow her activity,
Right.
or when you can follow that she's getting up really early in the morning, etc. So probably you don't want to follow it all the time, but you want to have exceptions. So if something changes,
Right.
that's the thing you want to know. And I think that will be the next step.
And I think you're right. The next step is the changes, and then what do I do? Because again, I'm not a clinical person. I could be like, well, I understand patterns, and I could say, oh, my mom's.
No, but you're alerted because it's
Yes.
strange.
Yeah.
Something, why does this change? And you will go, well, maybe you will alert your physician or her physician or something.
Yeah,
But I think the change is the most important piece of information.
Well, I think it's interesting to see if and how this connects back to their other one.
Yeah.
Like, will it automatically, if I'm sharing my data back to the EMR, can I share alerts back?
Yeah.
See, this is doors. Doors are coming open.
Yeah, but it is possible also, but not within the Apple ecosystem integrated like they do, but
Yeah.
or they should do, but there are separate solutions which already do this. It's
Yeah.
only a matter of integration in this platform. So beautiful.
All right. Well, I'm glad everyone else also thought that was exciting. With 5 minutes to spare, I'm on time today. I actually forgot to fill out this slide, so you just get my bullet points. Key takeaways. I like to be very honest in my presentations, so I didn't complete a slide. But really, I think the key things that I wanted you guys to walk away with was first that concept that we started with around properly defining the digital platform that's going to make sense for your patients, and really kind of driving home the you got to walk before you run bit. Because I know yesterday was super exciting around all these variations in consumer and personalization, and I think everyone in here has acknowledged that there's still some stuff to do with some of the existing flows. So really kind of understanding that and bringing that all home. And then really what I just wanted to leave you guys with was some food for thought around the types of digital disruptions we saw in the past 2 years, how some very much changed and are here to stay. And then how other things are kind of just starting to open doors and open thoughts for where we could go in the next year, 2 years, or onwards. And didn't update this slide either. You're at this session. Wow, guys, my apologies. So I did another session yesterday, which was really focused on the next, our patient engagement platform and where it's going. I believe everything's recorded, so I'm also happy to just tell you guys about that as well. I did want to call out, we have customers presenting later today. So Bay State's presenting on, he's right there, see? It's not a plant. I didn't invite him just for this moment. So Joe in the back has a really cool session this afternoon around how they leveraged our I know, our natural language processing technology in Iris to kind of analyze and drive their patient engagement moving forward. I've pre-seen it, so I am actually saying it very honestly, it's a really cool session and everyone should go to it. The other one occurred yesterday as well, but in this same theme around how we're dealing with getting data in and out of the EMR. We had a session on the innovation toolkit. Aslam's right there, so I'm just going to point everyone to him if you have questions.
Yeah, so
I didn't tell him.
Yeah, the session was yesterday, but if you have any questions, feel free to come to me. I'll be here around. And it's recorded, so shortly it should be available. Yeah.
Yes, and it was his team that did a lot of the stuff that I showed on screen. So that actually came out of a lot of our toolkit innovation work around the smart cards and some of our Apple Health integration. The other thing, because I have to say it, because I'm really excited about it, again, this wasn't a personal community session, but we're in the process of, as I said, kind of a re-envisioning of that application. We are running usability tests throughout the summit. We're one of, I think, 4 different applications running usability tests. So you have not gone and met Lisa and Christina near the check exchange. They're not actually in it. I gave everyone wrong directions yesterday. They're down the hallway. They have a sign now. But they're also doing a raffle. I think it's AirPods or something, but I would love if you all go and participate in the patient experience one. We have live software to play with. We also have other wireframes as well. And with that, you can find me anywhere. I just appear. I'll be here throughout the rest of the week and actually all day tomorrow. So if anyone wants to set up time with Talk to Me, I'm very happy to talk through it. And that's it. So any other thoughts, questions, parting words of wisdom I can leave you all with? Otherwise, I finally get to eat my cake. All right, thanks, guys.